My 15-year-old nephew snickered at dinner and said, "Why are you even here? Nobody really likes you, we only invite you because you pay for everything." Everyone at the table cracked up like it was funny. So I got up, cancelled the vacation I'd paid for all of them next month, and moved out of the house I was splitting rent on. Now they're blowing up my phone saying he's just a teenager and I'm overreacting. I never thought a single dinner could shatter my entire world. But when my nephew's cruel words hung in the air, I realized the real shock wasn't what he said, it was what they'd done long before that night. The air in the dining room that evening felt thick, heavy with unspoken tension I'd learned to ignore. We were all gathered, or rather, slouched, around the table I'd bought, the usual chaos of a family dinner slowly descending into something far more unsettling. My name is Ethan, I'm 34, and for the last decade, I've been the stable one in my family. You know the type, doesn't drink too much, keeps his voice down, pays bills on time, and somehow always ends up picking up the tab. The one everyone leans on, never really thanks, and quietly resents once the check clears. I'm not married, no kids, no major drama, just a decent job, a quiet need for peace, and a tendency to say yes to things I absolutely should have said no to. Maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe I made it too easy for them. Let me rewind. I've always been close to my sister, Chloe, in that polite, distant kind of way. We were tight as kids, but adulthood brought out a side of her I never expected, a sense of entitlement dressed up as family loyalty. She married young, had 2 kids by 25, and since then, she's been this constant tornado of passive-aggressive jabs and emotional manipulation. Her husband, Mark, is just bland. Loud opinions, selective work ethic. I always suspected he didn't like me much. My polite silences probably made him feel judged, and my offers to help probably made him feel like I was keeping score. Spoiler, I wasn't. Not at first, anyway. For 4 years, I'd been splitting rent on a fairly large house with them, mostly for their financial reasons. They'd fallen behind on their mortgage, and I'd just moved back to town after a job transfer. Chloe floated the idea, we'd all go in on this rental, save money, share utilities. It'll be temporary, she'd said. Just until we're back on our feet. At the time, I thought, sure, why not? It'll help them, and I'll see my niece and nephew more. Win-win. Fast forward to now, and I'm still here, same house, same lease, paying just a little more than my share because, you make more, Ethan. And enduring a family dynamic that felt less like an explosion and more like a slow, suffocating leak. But I stayed. Because it's family. Because it felt easier than starting over. Because I thought maybe they'd eventually get it together. I should have seen the cracks earlier. Like the time Chloe borrowed my car for just the day and returned it 3 days later with an empty tank and a new dent in the bumper. Or when Mark casually suggested I pay for the internet upgrade, since you use it for work and all, even though he spent most evenings streaming conspiracy videos in HD. Or the way they always assumed I'd pick up the dinner tab when we went out, every single time. You got this one, right? Like it was some inside joke and I'd just forgotten the punchline. Still, I let it go. I told myself it wasn't worth the drama. That if I confronted them, it would just make things worse. That maybe they didn't realize how often they leaned on me. Maybe they appreciated me in ways they didn't know how to say. Then came the vacation. It started months ago. Chloe was stressed. The kids were burned out from school. And Mark was, you guessed it, between jobs again. I had some unused PTO and a decent bonus. Against my better judgment, I offered to book a beach house for all of us. 7 days, oceanfront, 2 hours away. My treat, I said, and I meant it. I really did. I just wanted to do something good, something fun, something that might make me feel connected to them again. Chloe cried. The kids were thrilled. Mark gave me a fist bump and said, "You're the man, Ethan." For a moment, I believed it might actually be a good idea. But things started shifting almost immediately. Chloe began treating the trip like it was her project. She picked the dates, assigned rooms, made a grocery list, even emailed me a spreadsheet of shared responsibilities, despite the fact that I was footing the entire bill. Then she suggested inviting her best friend and her kids along, just for a night or two. When I hesitated, she pouted like I'd just canceled Christmas. Mark started bragging to his friends about our beach house, casually dropping references to it like he owned the deed. And the kids, especially Alex, Chloe's 15-year-old son, started acting like I was their personal assistant. Ethan, can you drive me to soccer? Ethan, we're out of snacks. Ethan, your room smells like old books. It was grating, but again, I told myself, it's just teenage stuff. He's a kid. They don't get it yet. Until the night everything cracked. It was a Friday. We'd ordered takeout, my treat, obviously, and we're all sitting around the dining table. The kids were on their phones. Mark was halfway through a beer. Chloe was scrolling on her iPad, asking me how many bedrooms the beach house had again, because apparently the last 3 times I told her hadn't stuck. Then Alex laughed. It wasn't the kind of laugh you share with someone. It was the kind you aim at them. He looked up from his phone, right at me, and said, loud enough to freeze the room, "Why are you even here? Nobody actually likes you. We just invite you to stuff because you pay for everything." For a second, the silence was deafening. I remember thinking, surely someone is going to say something. Surely Chloe's going to snap at him. Surely Mark is going to at least pretend to be shocked. Surely someone's going to act like what just came out of that kid's mouth wasn't a nuclear bomb disguised as a joke. But no one did. Chloe snorted. Actually snorted, like it was the funniest thing she'd heard all week. Mark gave a low chuckle and shook his head. Even my niece, Maya, giggled into her cup, like she knew she shouldn't but couldn't help herself. And in that moment, something just clicked. I wasn't family. Not really, not to them. I was a wallet with legs, a chauffeur with Wi-Fi, an afterthought with a bank account. I felt heat crawl up my neck. I looked around that table I'd bought, in a dining room I paid for half of, in a house I never really belonged in. And I realized I'd been playing a role in a script they never intended to change. So, I stood up. No shouting, no dramatic gestures, just quiet clarity. I walked to my room, grabbed my laptop, canceled the vacation reservation with a few swift clicks, full refund, thankfully, and then started packing a bag. 10 minutes later, I walked back through the dining room holding my suitcase. Chloe blinked. "Wait, where are you going?" I looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilt or hesitation or the need to explain myself. I just said, "Out," and then I left. The next morning, my phone started buzzing. Texts, calls, voicemails, Chloe first, then Mark, then, weirdly, her best friend. Even my mom chimed in from out of state, asking why I was being so dramatic. Apparently, Alex was just being a teenager. I was blowing things out of proportion, and canceling the vacation was punishing everyone for one dumb joke. They keep calling. They keep texting. But I haven't gone back. Not yet. And what they don't know is that I'm not just done with the vacation. I might be done with all of it. If walking out of that house with my suitcase in hand was the moment I took my first breath of fresh air in years, what came next was the slow realization of just how polluted the air had been all along. I didn't have a plan at first. I booked a room in a modest hotel just off the highway, the kind with carpets that smell faintly like lemon cleaner and late checkouts nobody enforces. I sat on the edge of the bed, suitcase untouched, phone vibrating every few minutes with new messages. I didn't even read most of them. The previews told me everything I needed to know. Chloe, you seriously need to grow up. Mark, real mature, dude. Mom, I'm not picking sides, but this is a bit much, Ethan. A bit much. That phrase stuck with me. They were always saying that when I pushed back, the few times I actually did. When I said it wasn't fair that I paid more than half the rent. When I said maybe Alex needed consequences after he broke my headphones. When I mentioned offhandedly that I didn't feel very included in the decisions about our shared space. Every time I drew a boundary, they acted like I'd dropped a grenade at the dinner table. I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept bouncing between frustration and sadness and a weird gnawing feeling I couldn't quite name. Like I was mourning something, but I didn't know what. A version of my family that never really existed. The years I'd spent trying to earn love through helpfulness. The next morning, I went to a little diner, ordered pancakes I didn't eat, and stared out the window while the waitress refilled my coffee 3 times without asking. By noon, I found a furnished short-term rental on the other side of town. Expensive, but clean, quiet, and mine. I signed the lease that afternoon and paid 3 months up front. I didn't tell anyone. Let them stew. But as the silence dragged on, something strange happened. The calls didn't stop. They just changed. The first week, it was all about the trip. Chloe's voice messages grew increasingly frantic, guilt-laced with lines like, "The kids were so excited, Ethan." And, "I already told everyone about it." As if my cancellation was some personal attack on her ability to keep up appearances. She even tried weaponizing nostalgia. "Remember when we used to go to the river with Mom and Dad? You're taking that away from them now." Then Mark chimed in with his own unique brand of manipulation. "We can talk about this, man. But punishing Alex doesn't make you the bigger person." As if I'd slammed a door on some teachable moment they would have handled with grace and insight if only I hadn't been so sensitive. By the second week, though, the messages took a different turn, one I didn't expect. They started talking about the house. It began with subtle hints. Chloe texted, "Hey, just wondering when you'll be back. Rent's due soon." Then Mark sent me a message that said, "FYI, landlord's asking if you're still on the lease. Said you were just taking a break." And that's when I realized they didn't think I was serious. They thought I'd cool off, miss them, and come slinking back with my wallet open and my tail tucked. So, I sent Chloe a short, polite message. The first real communication since I walked out. "Hey, I'm not coming back. Feel free to transfer the lease into your name." She didn't reply for 2 days. When she did, it was a novel. Long paragraphs about how you can't just leave us like that and this affects all of us and you made a commitment. She tried appealing to my sense of duty, reminding me how I'd promised to help when they were struggling. How you were the one who said family sticks together. It wasn't until the very end of her rant that the real panic showed through. "We can't afford the full rent without you, Ethan." There it was. The truth. That sentence clung to the back of my mind like a parasite. It wasn't about me walking out. It was about the vacuum I left behind. Not emotional, but financial. I wasn't a brother or an uncle. I was a crutch. The longer I stayed silent, the more desperate the messages became. My mom, who had been mostly quiet during the initial blow-up, decided to get involved. She called me during a lunch break at work, her voice gentle, almost rehearsed. "Ethan, honey, can we talk?" I didn't hang up, but I didn't say much either. She started slow, asked how I was, if I was eating well. Then came the shift. "Chloe told me what happened. I know Alex said something awful, but he's a teenager. They say things they don't mean." I kept my voice steady. "He meant it." There was a pause. "Well, even if he did, you have to be the adult in the room." That's when I laughed. Not loudly, not bitterly, just a quiet exhale of disbelief. "I have been the adult in the room for 10 years, Mom." She didn't know what to say to that. That call ended with a familiar line, "I just don't want the family falling apart over something like this." Too late, I thought. Weeks passed. I settled into my new place. Quiet evenings. No teenage stomping upstairs. No Chloe barging into my room without knocking to ask if I could Venmo her for groceries. No Mark leaving passive-aggressive notes about the dishes I didn't wash after he used them. I should have felt free, light, liberated. But I didn't. Not yet. Because then came the betrayal that flipped everything upside down. It was a Thursday. I was getting ready for bed when I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Then I got a text, "Ethan, this is Mr. Henderson, your landlord. Please call me when you can. It's urgent." I felt that sick flutter in my stomach. I called him back immediately. He answered on the first ring. "Hey, Ethan. Sorry to bother you so late. I wanted to clarify something. Chloe and Mark told me you'd agreed to stay on the lease but live elsewhere. They said it was a temporary thing, some trial separation while you worked through a family disagreement." My mouth went dry. "They what?" He cleared his throat. "They sent me a signed copy of the lease renewal last week. It had your name on it. Electronic signature. Same email as before." I sat down. "I didn't sign anything." Silence. "Are you saying that wasn't you?" "No," I said, my voice tight. "It wasn't." That night, I barely slept. My mind kept replaying the implications. They forged my signature. They used my name. They lied to the landlord to keep my financial liability tethered to a lease I had no intention of continuing. The next morning, I drove straight to the property management office with my ID and a printed copy of every text and email I'd exchanged with Chloe and Mark. The office manager was professional, but I could tell she was appalled. Mr. Henderson called me later that day to apologize. "We'll void the renewal immediately. And don't worry, they'll be responsible for the full amount going forward." I thanked him, hung up, and sat in my car staring at my hands for 10 solid minutes. That was the moment. Not the insult at dinner, not the laughter, not the texts telling me to get over it. This was the moment I realized they were willing to lie, to manipulate, even commit fraud, so they wouldn't have to take responsibility for their own lives. That wasn't just selfish. That was dangerous. And I was done being polite about it. I wish I could say I stormed out of the landlord's office with fire in my chest and a perfect plan forming in my head, but I didn't. I just sat there in my car for a long time, breathing. It was a weird kind of quiet. The kind that follows a controlled detonation. Not chaos, not screaming, just a stillness that told me the damage was done and there was no going back. I wasn't angry anymore. That was the scary part. I wasn't even surprised. Somewhere deep down, I think I knew this was always who they were. I just spent years painting over it with the soft brush of their family. But family doesn't fake your signature. I went home. Home, not the house. I stood in my kitchen while the kettle boiled. The windows were open. Outside, some kid was riding his bike up and down the block, laughing like nothing in the world had ever disappointed him. And for a second, I envied that kind of freedom, that total unawareness of what it feels like to be used by the people you'd once have dropped everything for. That night, I sat down and started writing. Not a letter, not a message, just writing. I needed to get it out of me. Everything I'd bottled up. Every time I'd been told I was too sensitive or making a big deal out of nothing. Every holiday where I paid for everything and left with a hollow ache in my chest. Every birthday where I smiled at a half-hearted happy birthday and a card signed in someone else's handwriting. I wrote until 2 a.m. Pages and pages of memories I hadn't realized I was still carrying like lead weights in my ribs. When I finally closed the notebook, I felt lighter. Still hurt, but lighter. The next few weeks were quiet, but the kind of quiet that comes from deliberate absence. The kind you build around yourself like a wall. Chloe stopped calling. Mark didn't text. My mom tried once or twice, but when I didn't reply beyond a simple, "I'm okay," she gave up. And in that silence, I started to heal. I focused on work. I volunteered for projects I used to turn down. I started eating lunch with coworkers instead of disappearing into my office like a ghost. People started inviting me to things, trivia nights, happy hours, weekend hikes, and for the first time in a long time, I said yes. It was awkward at first. I'd forgotten how to talk about things that weren't family-related. But over time, I remembered how to laugh at bad jokes, how to ask about someone's weekend and genuinely care about the answer, how to share stories that didn't start with, "my sister once." Then came the day my manager, Sarah, pulled me aside. "You've been killing it lately," she said, smiling. "I don't know what changed, but I'm glad to see it." I shrugged, a little embarrassed. "Just fewer distractions, I guess." "Well, whatever it is, it's working. There's a team lead position opening up next quarter. I think you should apply." That hit me harder than I expected. Not because of the promotion, but because I realized, maybe for the first time, that I had value outside of being useful to my family. I was good at what I did. I was responsible, capable, reliable. Traits I'd always seen as burdens were actually strengths. And when they weren't being constantly exploited, they started to shine. I started going to therapy, too. I'd been meaning to for years, but money always seemed better spent on someone else's emergencies. Now, sitting across from someone whose job wasn't to judge or dismiss me, but to actually listen, that was its own kind of strange, vulnerable relief. We talked about boundaries, about childhood, about why I'd spent so long bending myself into shapes that fit other people's needs. "You've been trained to believe love is something you earn," my therapist said one day gently. "But real love isn't transactional. It doesn't keep a ledger." That stuck with me. So did the next thing she said. "Your absence is revealing the shape of your worth to them, not because they miss you, but because they miss what you did for them. That's not your fault. But it's important to see it clearly." I saw it more clearly every day. Like when Chloe finally messaged me, not to apologize, but to say they were struggling to cover rent and really could use a little help, just for a few months. She wrapped it in flowery language, talked about the kids missing me, said Alex was sorry if he upset me. Not sorry for what he said, just sorry if I took it the wrong way. I didn't reply. Instead, I started boxing up the remnants of that chapter of my life. I donated the old couch I'd bought for the shared house. Gave away the spare set of dishes. Sold a few things online, not out of spite, but because they didn't feel like mine anymore. They were artifacts of a role I no longer played. And somewhere along the way, I started dreaming again. Little things at first. I took a weekend trip to the mountains. Started sketching again, just for fun. Signed up for a cooking class. I made friends who didn't know me as the guy who pays for everything. They just knew me as Ethan. The guy who tells surprisingly funny deadpan jokes. The guy who's obsessed with grilled cheese experiments. The guy who finally seems like he's coming back to life. But then something happened that shook me in a different way. I got a call from my niece, Maya. Not Alex, not Chloe, not Mark. Maya, 14. Smart, shy, always kind to me in that gentle, middle child way. We hadn't spoken since I left. "Uncle Ethan?" Her voice was soft, like she didn't know if she had the right number. "Hey, Maya," I said, instantly softening. "You okay?" She didn't answer right away. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "Why don't you come around anymore? Mom says you're mad at Alex, but you didn't even say goodbye." She wasn't angry. She wasn't accusing. She sounded hurt. I swallowed. "I didn't leave because of you, sweetheart. Or even just Alex. It was bigger than that. But I should have told you. I'm sorry." Silence again. Then, "I miss you." I closed my eyes. I miss you, too. We talked for a few minutes. Nothing deep, just school stuff. Her favorite teacher, a new video game she liked. I promised to call her again soon. She made me promise twice. When I hung up, I just sat there staring at the wall. Because that was the hardest part. Not the betrayal, not the manipulation, but the collateral damage. There were people in that house I loved. Kids I'd watched grow up. Memories that weren't all bad. And now, a fracture I wasn't sure could be repaired. Not without me falling back into old patterns. So, I made a decision. One I didn't tell anyone about. Not yet. But it involved lawyers and paperwork and a quiet, careful plan that had nothing to do with shouting or revenge or dramatic exits. Just clarity and consequence. I wasn't going to let them steal my name, my stability, or my peace. Not anymore. And I wasn't done yet. Maya's call had lingered in my chest for days. That soft, unsure voice asking why I didn't say goodbye, it hit harder than any insult Alex ever threw at me. And not because I felt guilty for leaving. No, that decision still felt right. But it reminded me that in all this emotional wreckage, there were innocent bystanders. People who got caught in the crossfire of a war they didn't start. That's when I realized something important. I wasn't just walking away from toxicity. I was also leaving behind the one thing I had always underestimated: leverage. Because for years I had been the quiet one, the helper, the problem solver, the guy who made things easier without asking for credit. But now I'd stepped back, and for the first time, I could see the whole structure, how it operated, where the weak spots were, and more importantly, how fragile it really was without me. And that's when the anger came back. Not loud, not destructive, just steady, cold, controlled. The kind of anger that sharpens you, not blinds you. Because I wasn't just going to disappear and let them keep spinning the same lies. I wasn't going to let Chloe and Mark weaponize family while exploiting me behind the scenes. And I definitely wasn't going to let a forged signature slide. It was time to shift from recovery to strategy. And I had more cards than they thought I did. First, I called Mr. Henderson, the landlord. I told him everything. Not just about the forged signature, but the pattern. How I had covered rent multiple times to prevent eviction. How Chloe once forgot to pay the electric bill and used my card without asking. How they misrepresented shared costs and routinely pressured me into paying extra because you make more. To his credit, Mr. Henderson was sympathetic and more than a little alarmed. I had no idea it was that deep, he said. They made it sound like you were just being emotional. I laughed bitterly. Of course they did. I'll make a note, he said. Just so you know, their lease ends in 3 months. They're already a month behind. Interesting. Very interesting. After that call, I did something I'd been avoiding. I went through my email receipts, bank statements, Venmo history, every digital breadcrumb from the past 4 years. I built a folder titled Household Expenses, and inside it, I created subfolders for everything: rent overages, utilities, food, furniture, emergencies. Every single favor I'd done was now a PDF with a timestamp. By the end of the week, I had a 77-page document. I didn't plan to sue them. Not yet. But it felt good to have the truth organized in case I needed it. Step 2 was therapy again. Not just because I needed support, I did, but because I wanted clarity. I told my therapist everything: the forged lease, the manipulated vacation, the way I felt used, discarded, then guilt-tripped into silence. She looked at me and said, "You're not overreacting. You're reacting appropriately." It felt good to hear. Then she added, "If you're still trying to help the kids, Maya especially, you need to approach this like a long game. You can't be the superhero crashing through the window. You need to be the steady presence that doesn't flinch, even when they pretend they don't need you." That stuck with me. So, I started planning with that mindset. I wrote Maya a handwritten letter. Nothing too serious, just something warm, personal, and thoughtful. I told her I missed her, that I was proud of her, that even when I wasn't around, I still cared deeply about her life, and that no matter what anyone said, she could always call me. I mailed it with a little sketch I'd drawn of her favorite game character, something she used to beg me to doodle during long car rides. I didn't hear back right away, but that wasn't the point. The point was letting her know I was still there, just not there. Then came step 3. I reached out to my old college roommate, Liam. Liam was now a real estate attorney, the smart, low-key kind who wore hoodies to meetings and could take down a shady landlord or tenant with surgical precision. We hadn't spoken in years, but when I texted him asking for a meeting, he replied within an hour. "You buying a house or burying someone legally?" I told him, not burying, just sending a message. We met for coffee and I laid it all out. He listened without interrupting, asked the occasional question, took notes on a yellow pad like it was a deposition. When I finished, he looked up. "You know this is fraud, right? Like, actual prosecutable fraud." I nodded. "I figured. You want to press charges?" "No," I said. "Not yet. I want them to feel the weight of what they did, but I also want options, legal leverage. I don't want them pulling this crap again." He leaned back. "You're playing chess." "I like it." Liam drafted a cease and desist letter. It was surgical. No emotion, no threats, just a cold, clear outline of what they'd done, what laws they'd broken, and how any further attempt to involve me in their affairs, financial or otherwise, would be met with formal legal action. Then we mailed it. Certified. Signature required. Chloe signed for it. 2 days later, my phone lit up like a pinball machine. Missed calls, voicemails, some angry, some panicked. One from Mark that said, "You really think you can threaten your own family like this?" I didn't respond, because step 4, the most important step, was silence. Silence was power. The less I said, the more they had to guess. And judging by the frantic tone of Chloe's voicemails, they were guessing all the wrong things. They thought I was suing them. They thought I was going to tell the whole family. They thought I was turning Maya against them. And I didn't correct any of it. Instead, I poured myself into work, applied for the team lead role, got it, started saving money, took a weekend trip to Boston, met some friends, laughed until my stomach hurt. Then I came home and signed up for a woodworking class. Something I'd always wanted to try, but never had time for. I wasn't just rebuilding. I was expanding. And the entire time, I kept one eye on the calendar, because Chloe and Mark's lease was ending soon. They were already a month behind. And I had a very strong suspicion that without me holding the bottom line together, they were going to start spiraling. And when they did, I wanted to be ready. Not to gloat, not to destroy them, but to show them that I was the foundation. And now that I was gone, they'd have to figure out how to stand on their own. Or collapse. And that collapse, it was coming sooner than they thought. The collapse came on a rainy Tuesday morning, the kind that turns the world a dull gray and makes every sound feel heavier. I was sitting at my desk, sipping coffee, when the first text came through. "Chloe, Ethan, please, we need to talk. It's serious." I didn't reply. An hour later, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. When I checked the message, it was Chloe. Voice tight, clipped, but cracking around the edges. "Ethan, I don't know what else to do. The landlord served us an eviction notice. We're behind, and he's not letting us extend. He said you told him not to. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you're ruining people's lives." That part made me laugh out loud. Because what she was really saying was, "You stopped carrying us, and now we're falling apart." I didn't call her back. I didn't need to, because my part, it was already done. It started a month earlier when I got the official word from Mr. Henderson that Chloe and Mark hadn't paid a dime of rent since I left. Not one. They'd promised partial payments, made excuses, dodged phone calls. At first, he gave them leeway, probably because they had kids, but by month 3, he'd had enough. They were getting 30 days' notice to vacate, legally, peacefully, but firmly. He asked me, off the record, if I wanted to be notified when they were removed. I told him no. But I did ask him one thing: can you make sure the kids are out of the house when it happens? He paused, then said quietly, I'll do what I can. So, while the clock ticked down on their lease, I waited. And while I waited, I prepared. See, revenge, real revenge, isn't about fireworks. It's about pressure. It's about removing the thing they leaned on most and letting nature do the rest. Chloe and Mark had built their entire world on the quiet assumption that I would always be there. That I would forgive, that I would fix, that I would pay. And now, for the first time, they had to answer for their own decisions. Word spread quietly through the family. I hadn't said much, but the story got around. Not from me, I was careful about that, but from Chloe's own desperate flailing. She told our mom, hoping to turn her into an ally. But instead, it just cracked open a conversation our family had been avoiding for years. Mom called me one night, days before the eviction notice was served. Ethan, she said, I want to apologize. I was quiet, waiting. I should have stepped in sooner. I didn't realize how much they were leaning on you, or how long it had been going on. They didn't hide it, I said. You just didn't want to see it. She sighed. I know. And for the first time in years, we had an honest conversation. No guilt, no manipulation, just truth. She told me Chloe had always assumed I'd be fine because Ethan's the responsible one. That she figured I didn't mind because I never complained. That's the thing, I said. I shouldn't have had to complain. She didn't argue. When the eviction was finalized, I didn't celebrate. I went for a walk. It was a strange day, sunny but cool, with a wind that made the leaves shiver on the trees. I kept thinking about Maya, about how hard this was going to be on her. I hated that part, but I also knew she'd learned something through all this. Something about honesty, responsibility, and the cost of pretending things are fine when they're not. I didn't want her to see me as the villain. So, I sent her a message, just one sentence: if you need anything, I'm always here, no matter what your parents say. She replied with a heart emoji. Simple, but powerful. I didn't know where they moved right away, but I found out through mutual connections that they were staying at Mark's cousin's place across town. Cramped, temporary, not ideal. Chloe had tried applying for a new place, but her credit was bad, and with an eviction on her record, most landlords wouldn't touch her. She called me again the week after the move. I let it go to voicemail, but this time I listened. Her tone had changed. No anger, just resignation. I just wanted to say, you win. Okay? Is that what you wanted? You got what you wanted. I paused the message, thought about it. No, I thought, this wasn't about winning. This was about stopping the cycle, stopping the mistreatment, stopping the slow erosion of my peace for the sake of people who would never protect it. When I resumed the message, her voice softened. I know we messed up. I know what Alex said was awful. I should have said something. I just didn't think you'd disappear. I didn't disappear, I thought. I just stopped bleeding for people who didn't notice I was bleeding. She ended with, if you want to see the kids, I won't stop you. They miss you. That part made my chest ache, because despite everything, I did miss them. Maya especially. But I still didn't call her back, because some doors, once closed, should stay closed, at least for a while. Instead, I started seeing Maya outside of them. Little things at first. Coffee with her after school, dropping off art supplies she mentioned wanting, showing up for her school play and staying far enough back that Chloe wouldn't see me. I didn't need to be loud about it. I just needed her to know I hadn't abandoned her. Over time, I found peace again. Not the numb kind I used to survive those years. Real peace. I got promoted again at work. Bought a condo. Nothing fancy, just mine. My own walls, my own kitchen, my own music playing softly in the background on Saturday mornings while I cooked breakfast. I even started dating again, carefully, quietly, someone kind, someone who didn't need fixing. It took time, but I rebuilt myself, stronger, wiser, calmer. And eventually, I got a letter from Alex. It was short, typed, printed on plain white paper, and folded into an envelope with no return address. Uncle Ethan, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if you want to hear from me, but I wanted to tell you that I'm sorry for what I said, for how I acted. I was trying to be cool or funny or whatever, and I didn't think about what I was actually saying. You were always there. I see that now. I don't know why no one else seemed to see it at the time, but you were, and we took advantage of that. I don't deserve a second chance, but I hope you know that I regret it. Alex. I read it 3 times, then folded it carefully and tucked it into the back of my journal. I never wrote back. Some apologies are meant to be carried, not answered. And as for Chloe and Mark, last I heard, they were still scrambling. Different jobs, smaller place, less stability. I don't wish them harm. I just wish they'd learned earlier. But in the end, maybe that's the real revenge. Not the eviction, not the silence, not the cold precision of walking away, but the fact that I'm thriving. Not in spite of them, but because I finally stopped sacrificing myself to keep their comfort intact. They lost their safety net. I found my freedom. And the final thread holding me to that version of my past snapped cleanly, quietly, powerfully. I was never their foundation. I was their lifeboat. And when I stepped out, they finally had to learn how to swim. What would you have done in my place?